obviously you're missing calls with family and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
this is a catch up.
Okay.
Am I alone? What's going on here?
Oh, okay.
I'm feeling alone. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you,
Chair.
Your Worship. We have quorum, so I'm going to call the 9th meeting of the Civic Works Committee to order. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact cwc@london.ca. At this moment, I will ask for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, before we move to the consent items, I would like to call on Councillor Pelosi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking to move item 4.2 under items for direction to be dealt with first.
And I will second it. Any discussion? Seeing none, then I will call the vote on moving item 4.2 to the top of our agenda. I'll go with voice. Who's on? Your Worship?
Yes.
Councillor Pelosi?
Yes.
Councillor Lewis?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion is carried 4-0.
Thank you. I will go to Councillor Pelosi as she has made a motion with regards to 4.2, the Mad Canada Memorial sign request, the information that we received. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before us today attached was a letter from a family who've lost their son to drunk driving. And attached to that was a request from Mad Canada for a memorial sign. Currently, Mad Canada has agreements with the province for highway signs. The road in which they were speaking deals with a municipal sign. So the motion before you is to request that Civic Administration work with Mad Canada to implement a sign program and a memorandum of understanding, which covers how many names per sign and the cost associated with it, which Mad Canada covers wholly for the creation, installation, and maintenance of the sign. On to this, after speaking with Mayor Holder, we're going to like to move Part B to direct Civic Administration to work with Mad Canada to find appropriate place within the city for a permanent area to allow families an opportunity to gather and grieve. And I will look to the mayor to add his thoughts into that Part B.
Okay, I'll go to Your Worship.
Thanks very much, Chair, and I'd be prepared to second that from the councillor. Colleagues, this is not something I typically publicly share, but I lost my son in a car accident when he was 14 years old. And I will tell you that whether you are the victim of a drunk driver or victim of any circumstance where you've lost a child, any parent would say it's the most unbelievable thing that can ever happen. And my wife and I would say that. But why I support the direction where the councillor is going to find a single site, not a series of sites, but a single site where we could acknowledge, and I'm even prepared to be sensitive to MAD that I have supported in my former political life extensively for their advocacy against drinking and driving, even though my son was not a victim of drinking and driving, just bad judgment of a young driver. And I would say to you that having a single site, wherever that might well be, where we can honor and respect and respect those who died and educate the public on these things, to me, not only makes thoughtful sense, but I think is respectful of what we are trying to accomplish. Because if we have single sites, Chair, then what happens is that those can inadvertently become distractions by themselves, which would never be the intention of MAD. But if we have a place that brings people together who have lost an adult child, doesn't matter the age, and we can find a spot where they can be honored and regarded and respected and referenced by name, whatever that might look like, to me, that makes a great statement. Because look, when my son was killed at the corner of Fanshawe and Richmond, I have to tell you, so I understand this, for 10 years, I laid a wreath on his death day, which was December 20th, right through to just Boxing Day after Christmas. And I kept it for a week. It was a wreath I laid at the southeast corner, Fanshawe and Richmond. I understand why people want to do that. But I will also say to our friends who've lost a child, that's what a cemetery, that is what a place of worship and respect is for. But we do not want to have, in a city of any size, and our city, a series of places where the place for them is, in fact, a cemetery or a place of worship for them. So, Chair, I would tell you that I will tell you from my own experience, as someone who has lived experience with this, that the counselor is correct to have a spot where we can congregate all of us. And maybe the focus is on MAD, which is impaired driving, which could be alcohol or drugs. And it doesn't matter, it's impaired driving deaths. I am so comfortable with that. And I would challenge staff to find that place and work with MAD, but work with our own staff about this and work with those with lived experience with this. But I will say, I do not want to see a cross or a memorial at every place, at every corner, at every intersection and every other spot. Because you know what? I don't want to be a place where we are tombstones of a community that has lost great loved ones. And no one dare challenge me on this, because I've lost my son. No one dare challenge this, because from my heart, I believe we need to honor and respect. We find different ways to honor and respect our special sweethearts. I've lost Bruno. And I would tell you that we need to find this right way to do this. And as well intended as the initial motion was, I support the councillor's revision to make this a place where we can honor and celebrate those lives, challenge Londoners to be better. That's what we're trying to do. So I hope councillors will support the direction that the learned councillor has chosen. I think it's wise. And if we can do that the right way, then, you know, we honor and respect all of our loved ones. I get that. I think and hope the councillors would as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Are there any other comments or questions from the committee? I see we've Councillor Hillier joining us as well. Sorry, Councillor Hillier, I'll come to you after Councillor Cassidy. I saw she raised her hand. Go ahead, Councillor.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I was saying hi too because I joined the meeting late. My apologies for that as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Just a quick question. Councillor Van Meerbergen, would that be you that has come on through Zoom through your phone?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Some technical hiccups, so I resorted to the phone.
Okay.
Apologies for the lateness. Thank you.
Okay, so for benefit of those that we're able to overcome the technical challenges in this world of Zooming. We are on 4.2, which was moved to the top of the agenda. And I'll go to Councillor Hillier now.
Maureen Cassidy, I was just saying hello.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so seeing no other comments or questions, I'll weigh in here. I want to thank the mayor for being candid and sharing his obviously very personal and painful experience. You know, our job as councillors, we rely on information that we receive from our constituents and what we learn from people smarter than ourselves, but we also use our own personal lives to help us come to the right decision. We've all been touched by impaired drivers, unfortunately, but some have been touched more than others, and for sure the death of a child in a traffic accident is, I can't think of too much worse. I thank you to the council for making this motion and for working with the mayor, because I think that's a great solution to have one spot as well. I support that. I will leave it at that. Seeing there's no other questions or comments, and I would like to call the vote. I'd just like to ask the clerk, are we voting on two separate parts here or on the whole thing? We are going to be voting as a whole. We need a seconder. I will go to the mayor for that. Councillor Cassidy, were you seconding or did you have a question? Oh.
I have a question.
Question? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Could the clerk please read the motion?
Go ahead, clerk.
Through the chair, Councillor Cassidy, would you like the addition read or the entire motion?
The entire motion, please.
That the following actions be taken with respect to the memorial sign request submitted by Shauna and David Andrews, dated June 1st, 2020, and supported by Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MAD Canada. A, that the Civic Administration be directed to engage in discussions with MAD Canada regarding MAD Canada memorial signs and to bring forward a proposed memorandum of understanding with MAD Canada for Council's approval, it being noted that MAD will cover all sign manufacturing and installation costs. It being further noted that the Ministry of Transportation and MAD have set out in this Memorandum of Understanding the terms and conditions for the placement of memorial signs on provincial highways, which is not applicable to municipal roads. It being further noted that MAD provides messages consistent with the London Road Safety Strategy, and Clause B, that the Civic Administration be directed to work with MAD Canada to find a single permanent location in London for the purpose of memorials.
Councillor Cassidy?
Oh, I wonder, sorry to throw this in at the last minute, if we might just send, whether it comes from the mayor or the chair of the committee, if we might just send a note acknowledging the letter from the Andrews.
I'm fine to send that from the chair. Your worship, would you like to speak to that? No, okay. Yeah, we will do that. Thank you, Councillor. That's a really good idea. So, clerk, are we ready to call the vote? Okay, then I'll call the vote. We'll go first to the mayor.
Yes.
Councillor Pelosa.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Cassidy.
Yes.
Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion is carried 6-0.
Mayor Holder.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going to be excusing myself in about 10 minutes because I have been surreptitiously invited to participate. Surreptitiously is the wrong word, but I've been graciously invited to participate in the Finance Committee of the federal government on issues relating to municipal government financial impacts. And so in about 10 minutes, using myself, and I did not want to disrespect the committee by telling them, by surprising them and letting them know that I'll be slipping away within several minutes.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you. I know you've got a busy prep work because that meeting's coming up in a few minutes. So that tells us how important that issue was for you to attend, so thank you very much. I will now, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Chair. Just with the mayor departing early, I just want to speak on a point of personal privilege very briefly to extend my wishes, and I believe it would probably be all of our wishes, to the mayor on a very happy birthday, Your Worship. Since this is the first committee meeting of the day, I wanted to make sure that we all acknowledged that you're working hard on your birthday on behalf of Londoners. So although I'm sure you would rather be spending it perhaps with your wife, and perhaps there'll be time for that later, thank you for working for us on your birthday.
Well, Chair, can I say that's very kind, Councillor Lewis. Duty first, as they say, but you know what? Come by at some point. Tonight I won't be there, but come by and celebrate my birthday. But thank you for the kind wishes, all of you, and Sean for directing that accordingly. That's very thoughtful. Thank you all. And
I will just say you look terrific for 59 years old.
And that's why you will never the map test. God bless you.
So I'll now move on to the consent items. I've had no request for any items to be pulled. I'll ask at this time if anything should be pulled.
Mr. Chair, this is Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Go ahead, Councillor.
If we could, I'd like to vote on 2.4 and 2.6 separately.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other items to be pulled? Seeing none, then I will look for a motion to vote on 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.5, and then we will have comments or questions after that. Councillor Pelosa, do I have a seconder? Councillor Cassidy. Questions or comments on those items? Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, just in regards to item 2.3, as some of the public has been reaching out to me in regards for it. In regards to it'd be a question through you to Mr. Stanford. In regards to the Hefty Energy Bag pilot program, residents have reached out asking what's happening with the expansion, and some have ran out of their orange energy bags and wondering where the city's at in replacing those, recognizing it's COVID, but they're really excited for the program, which is great to see. So just a brief update on what's happening with that.
Mr. Stanford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. The pilot project for the Hefty Energy Bag, of course, like many items, has suffered its challenges during the COVID process. So a number of our measurements as part of that program to determine how well it's doing, they've been delayed. The project carries on. We have not been able to expand at this point in time because we want to complete the existing measurements on the first round, which we plan to do later in July and into August. At that point in time, the partners on the project will determine the best course of action on how we can not only expand, but also take care of those that are participating right now, given that we are all dealing with just these different challenges in the way we do our business. We plan on bringing a brief update to the Waste Management Working Group in August, which in turn then goes to Civic Works Committee shortly after that. At that point, we should have complete information back from the pilot project partners on how we can best expand. Just as a quick summary note, we've heard very positive comments from many involved, and of course, we have many that are not involved. We just not sure why, and that is part of the exploration that we want to conduct later in July and August to get a better read on what the program is doing. And for those that aren't familiar with that, the program is all about collecting hard to recycle plastics and putting them to better use and keeping them out of our landfill state and of course out of ditches and streams.
Thank you. Any other further follow-up on that, Councillor? Any other questions or comments on the consent items that are before us now? Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Yes, thank you. 2.5. I've got a question regarding this technology to track odors, and I gather decipher them. My specific question is, it seems, okay, these are aimed at W12A at the landfill. I'm wondering if there are odors that drift across, say, from Orgo World. Is this technology able to tell us if there are other odors coming from different locations other than W12A?
Mr. Stanford?
Through the chair, that is exactly what this technology is, we hope, is being designed for. It has been in use in other locations. We know that we have some additional challenges with a landfill site, and that will be part of our upcoming discussions with the vendor. But the idea being is that this is measuring 24/7, and over a period of time of getting measurements, the technology then is capable of getting, it's almost like a fingerprint of the odor characteristics, so it can then be traced back to the different locations within a reasonable understanding of which facilities are likely contributing to the odor.
Councillor.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. It just seemed to me that, you know, perhaps W12A could be getting some blame for additional smells that are drifting across from other sources. But it sounds like this technology may be able to decipher that. So thank you very much, Mr. Stanford.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as these are issues within Ward 12 and Ward 14, just for committee's knowledge that Orgo World became Renewy, which is now Convetris, just for we're addressing the appropriate property owners.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions or comments, I will put those items to the vote. I will start with Councillor Pelosa.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Cassidy.
Yes.
Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, that motion carries 5-0.
We'll move on to item 2.4, Dundas Place. This is the appointment of a consulting engineer for the Thames Valley Parkway Active Transportation Connection. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, then I will put that on the floor. Can I have a motion to accept that? Councillor Pelosa. I have a seconder. Councillor Lewis. Last chance for questions or comments before I put the vote. Okay, I'll call the vote. Councillor Pelosa.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Cassidy.
Yes.
Councillor Van Meerbergen.
No.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, that motion is carried 4-1.
Thank you, and I'll look for a motion on 2.6, and that is to accept a bid submitted by Dufferin Construction Company on the cycle track for Dundas Street. Can I have a motion to accept, please? Councillor Lewis. Seconder, Councillor Cassidy. Questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to comment, please.
Go ahead, Councillor.
It just strikes me, we're looking at an expenditure of $3.7 million coming from the tax base for a bicycle track at a time when we are what all would describe as quite a serious financial crunch. Just a couple of weeks ago, it was a relatively big deal to go to an externally funded, or possibly go to an externally funded reserve fund to the tune of 50 to 80,000, perhaps, and that was a big question mark. But here we are expending with certainty $3.7 million on what I would argue is not a priority, specifically at this time. So I will definitely not be voting for this. This does not make sense at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Cassidy.
First of all, Mr. Chair, I just want to say that of the two contractors that bid on this project, I'm not related to the Cassidy Construction Company in any way. And secondly, I want to say this is exactly the right time to be following through with commitments that we've already made for these kinds of investments when we have many people in our city that rely on public transportation, and many of these people have been identified as our essential workers, the people we've relied on to help us survive during the quarantine, people working in the grocery stores, people working in takeout restaurants, things like that, janitorial services, those kinds of workers, many of them, and our healthcare workers as well, many of them rely on public transit. And right now, with the pandemic still raging through our country and around the world, many people are afraid and nervous about taking public transit because they don't want to be in an enclosed space for a prolonged period of time with other people in close proximity. So cycling, improved pedestrian connections, all sorts of active transportation opportunities are important to allow people to get around the city, not to mention people that need to get their groceries and get to medical appointments that can't afford to buy their own personal vehicle. This is where we need these options for people that we rely on in those frontline services, not to mention the people that need to get around for their own survival. So I will definitely be supporting this.
Other comments or questions?
I just have to add, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councillor.
If I could, thank you. Bicycles can still ride and move about the existing structures that are in place. This is an enhancement, and again, not a priority at this time, certainly to the tune of almost $4 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to just briefly weigh in on this. And I'm going to respectfully, I'm supporting this, but not for the reasons that Councillor Cassidy outlined. I appreciate where she's coming from, but to me, it's not the short-term situation of people choosing something other than transit right now. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what the COVID situation will look like in a month, let alone 3 or a year from now. What it is for me is a long-term investment in our city's infrastructure. And it's also awarding a contract that's going to get shovels in the ground and people who may not have work right now back to work, stimulating the economy and getting cash flowing again through businesses. So that's why I'm supporting it. It's a long-term investment in infrastructure. It's something that we supported in our multi-year budget. It's something that I know is going to be a challenge to some of the businesses in the Old East Village area, particularly as they're recovering from COVID. But in the long term, I think there will be a benefit there. I've certainly talked with the OEV BIA representatives about this. I've heard from folks in the cycling community about this. Is this a perfect solution for everyone? No, there's actually a difference of opinion on what would be the best option, but it is moving the goalpost forward on some infrastructure that's long overdue for investment in the city. So I'm very supportive of it. I understand where Councillor Cassidy's coming from. I'm coming from a different place. Not that I disagree with what she's saying in the short term, but for me, this is long term. So we're playing the long game here and getting people back to work while we do it. That's a good thing.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. I just wanted to say briefly to Councillor Lewis mentioning the connection into Old East Village. As colleagues know, there is another construction project underway already just further down on Dundas, where another section of the cycle track will be constructed. And I do think it's important that we go ahead with this project at this time. It's obviously part of an integrated plan to create better cycling infrastructure east-west through the core. One part is already under construction. This is the next part that is going to be built. I think it has a number of benefits beyond the cycling benefits that Councillor Cassidy has already mentioned. One thing that the city can do as we're moving into economic recovery is spend money to build infrastructure that is needed in the community. And I think about this from the perspective of the company that is about to be awarded the contract. Set aside the cycling benefits that come from building protected cycle tracks. Here's a company that has bid on a project that has been approved by the city. Plans have been made for it. There's a consulting engineer was hired last year to plan it out. We're about ready to go. It's taken to tender. We're about to award the tender contract. And I think the last thing the private sector needs at a time when there's a lot of other things going sideways in the economy is for the city to start reconsidering and backing off of important public works projects. So I think we can disagree, and obviously Councillor Van Meerbergen and I don't have the same opinion about how important the cycling infrastructure is. But we really need to be cautious about wavering and reconsidering and backing off on things that have already had substantial amounts of work go into them, expectations created in the private sector about those projects moving ahead, and then pulling the rug out at the last second. So certainly I think for the reasons that Councillor Cassidy and Councillor Lewis have mentioned, the project is worthy of going ahead. And also I would say we should be very careful about the idea that we'll just cancel things and stop doing them as a way of containing costs when that has negative impacts overall in the economic recovery.
Thank you, Councillor Helmer, or Deputy Mayor Helmer. Councillor Van Meerbergen, did you want to weigh in there? I heard some noise from your phone. Councillor Van Meerbergen, did you have a question or comment? Okay, I don't know if he's having technical challenges, but seeing no other questions or comments, I'll just weigh in a bit here. This is not a question of whether this project should be done or not. That was the question last fall. This is a question of whether we award this contract to the successful bidder. And I agree with Councillor Helmer. Once projects have been put in place, our private sector invests a lot of time and energy in preparing these bids and getting geared up to do the work. And again, to touch on Councillor Cassidy's comments, infrastructure work right now. I'm sorry, Councillor Lewis's comments. Infrastructure work right now is important as it will stimulate the economy. There's different opinions out there regarding the expenditure of this money on this certain project. But again, that was a question last fall. What we're dealing with today is awarding the contract. So I will be supporting this. Seeing no other questions or comments, then I will, I think have we made the motion? Yeah, we have a motion and a seconder, so I will call the vote. Okay. Councillor Pelosa.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Cassidy.
Yes.
And I think we've lost Councillor Van Meerbergen. I will just wait for a few seconds here. Oh, okay. Okay, Councillor Van Meerbergen, are you with us? Councillor Van Meerbergen?
Mr. Chair, apologies, I was disconnected. I've just reconnected. What are we voting on right now?
So we are voting on 2.6, the awarding of the contract for the cycle track. I have already called the vote and was just waiting for you to reconnect so you can vote.
Right.
So it's over to you now for your vote.
Thank you. And that would be no.
Okay, and I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion is carried 4-1.
Thank you. So that is the end of the consent items. I will now move to items for direction. And in 4.1, we have a delegation that will present to the committee. I will look for a motion. Excuse me. I will look for a motion to receive the delegation. Did I do that? It's pre-approved, I'm sorry, so we can go, okay, so I will go to staff first, please, for an update on this project, and then I will look to the delegation for their time.
Through the chair, I have before you today the contract award for the Lambeth Avenue and Highway Avenue. And we're here to provide any kind of commentary following the delegation, and be happy to answer any questions you have once we've heard from the homeowner. Thank you.
And before I go to the delegation, do we have any comments or questions from the committee? Seeing none, then I'd like to welcome Heather Sanderson. Heather is joining us via Zoom from Committee Room 5. Heather, you have, I'm sorry, Ms. Sanderson, you have 5 minutes, and I understand you might have Mr. McCallum speak as well. It's total of 5 minutes for both of you combined, so just be aware of that. Kind of when you get to near that time, I might jump in and just remind you that you've got a minute or so left. So over to you, Ms. Sanderson.
Thank you. I will be quick. Good afternoon. So my name, as you said, is Heather Sanderson, and I am the owner of 58 Lambeth Avenue. I'm also joined, as you've mentioned, by Calvin, who is an arborist from CLC Tree Services. So on May 22nd, I was informed that due to infrastructure remodeling, there would be 15 mature trees removed from my street. I was provided with the tree preservation report and access to engineering documents. However, no public update meeting was held where I could ask questions to fully understand these documents, as I'm not an arborist or an engineer myself. Therefore, I hired an outside unbiased arborist, Calvin, to report on the trees that were being marked for removal. He found that there were discrepancies between the trees being removed and those that were not from a tree health perspective. So for example, the tree at 38 Lambeth Avenue has obvious trunk and root flare defects. It has a thick layer of grass at the base of the tree, indicating internal root rot, and ants and other insects are tunneling through it, yet it is being retained. However, the tree at 58 Lambeth Avenue has no health issues, yet it is being removed. I have provided the city with the report that Calvin put together, which outlines several other discrepancies between the trees being retained versus the trees that are being removed. Further, specifically the tree at 58 Lambeth Avenue, which is in my front yard, has been marked for removal because of construction conflicts. The exact meaning of construction conflicts was not defined in any report to me. Therefore, I'm here today to request a delay in the approval of this project until we can have an on-site meeting with Calvin, the engineer in charge of this project, their consulting arborist, and a forestry department manager. During this meeting, we want those involved to provide a comprehensive explanation on what the construction conflicts are with the trees that are being removed. We also want those involved to work with Calvin to explore potential engineering alternatives to retain more of these healthy trees on Lambeth Avenue. London is the forest city. My partner and I chose to move to this neighborhood specifically because of the mature trees, and our 50-plus-year-old maple tree means very, very much to us. It provides shade to our front lawn, a nesting place for our sparrows, and it is a source of pure beauty on our street. We really just want to save as many of these trees as possible, and we truly hope you consider a request for an on-site meeting so we can potentially save more of them. Thank you.
Want to take it?
Yeah, I can take it. That's all I have for you guys.
Thank you, Ms. Sanderson. I appreciate your input there. I'll now go to the committee for any questions or comments they might have of staff. Councillor Van Meerbergen, you're on mute. So I'm not too sure if, okay, you're unmuted now in case you wanted to participate or ask a question or comment.
Well, I guess my question, and thank you very much for that presentation to us and explaining the situation. To take some action here, for example, consulting with our staff, would that require a motion, or can we just simply ask that they consult with appropriate staff?
Let me consult with the clerk. Let's go to staff. My understanding is that if we want to delay the process, yes, we would need a motion, but I want to, I would like to go to Mr. Mathers and hear from Mr. Mathers what the implications would be to delay this to meet with the concerned people on the street, and or have you had an opportunity to meet with those persons and have already had their input and in making your decision? Mr. Mathers.
Through the chair, just like to thank the resident for they're definitely very active and interested on the trees on their street. As far as the actual the report that you have before you, delaying this report would both delay the work on Highway Avenue and on Lambeth Avenue. So that wouldn't be something that a staff would suggest to do right now. We'd have no issue with working with the resident more in a little bit more detail and having a site meeting to discuss some of those trees in question. The planning for the removal of the trees on Lambeth, right now we're not planning to remove those trees until spring, winter 2021. So there definitely is some time to work together on that. It's not it is very much expected that there would be differences between what the arborist that's hired by the homeowner and what the city's arborist, what their findings were. The arborist working for the homeowner has stated in the letter that his assessment is based on the health of the trees and the structure of the trees, which is a very reasonable approach to take. The city's arborist has more information. Our assessment is completed based on both the health and structure of the trees, but also on all the information from the technical design. And it wouldn't be a reasonable expectation for the homeowners arborist to have all that information. Every tree is different, so every tree we have a lot of detail of why we'd be recommending the removal of that tree. The arborist for the homeowners also suggested removal of additional trees beyond the 16 that we've already slated for removal. So we'd be, I think that would be reasonable to provide the findings of the arborist working for the homeowner to our arborist as well. And there wouldn't be a concern with us meeting with them in more detail. However, as far as moving the project forward, I think that would be, we would suggest continuing with that appointment of the contractor so we could get the work moving on Highway Ave, and as also just ensure that the work on Lambeth happens in a timely fashion as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mathers. I will be going to Councillor Cassidy. There's a minute and a half left for the delegation, and I see that Mr. McCallum would like to weigh in there, but before he does, I will go to Councillor Cassidy.
Mr. Chair, I don't mind hearing from the delegate first.
Okay, that's fine. Then I will go to you, Mr. McCallum, for the remainder of your time. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Minute and a half is kind of short to get through where I'm going from here, but I appreciate what Mr. Mathers was saying, and I do work regularly on other engineering projects as a consulting arborist for the City of London. There was a meeting about a year ago where we were all called into City Hall to talk about what they want involved in their reports, and basically with their tree preservation reports. In those meetings, they were asking for more mitigation options and not just a tree having to be removed due to conflicts. So as you can see in the report, it was an unbiased opinion, and yes, there are other trees that likely should be removed, but in this case on Highway Ave particularly, they've basically clear cut the street. And one of my biggest questions and concerns is nobody's been presented with ecological sweep or a Migratory Bird Act survey. So they were stopped, the contractors were stopped by a homeowner due to a nest in one of the trees. But in any one of these projects, it's federal law that you need to provide an ecological sweep of the trees to determine whether there's any migratory birds within them during the Migratory Bird Act. So there's some concerns with the constituents being that they are wildlife sensitive. They like their trees and they like the wildlife in their neighborhood. And they have concerns that things happened on both of these streets without enough communication back and forth. So my report is outlaying, and I've only been hired to explain to them what the engineers have come up with. But without having access to the engineers or to be able to bounce those questions off of them, I can't give them a full answer.
Thank you, McCallum. Very judicious words in a very short period of time. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also want to thank the delegates for coming before this committee, Ms. Sanderson and Mr. McCallum. Thank you for the information and your advocacy. This often comes up. There's often conflicts between our infrastructure projects and trees that have been on a street for a long period of time. Mr. Chair, at this point, I'm willing to move the staff recommendation with perhaps, and the clerk can advise, an it being noted clause. It being noted that staff have agreed to consult with the homeowner and her arborist to discuss the possible tree removals and the concerns that were raised during the delegation.
Would I have a seconder for that? Councillor Pelosa? Okay, questions or comments on that? Councillor Van Meerbergen, I'm going to go to you because you're on phone, so I want to make sure that you get a chance to weigh in if you so desire.
No, I'm fine currently, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and for Councillor Cassidy for moving that motion. My question would be through you to the delegates, if that motion would seek what you're looking for in relation to accessing staff and having explanations made.
Ms. Sanderson.
Yes, so I just want to be clear. I would like explanation, but then I would also like the city to be open to, again, as I've stated, engineering alternatives to potentially save some of these trees in working with Calvin and the rest of the city.
Councillor.
Thank you for that clarification, and through you to staff, is a review still possible at this time before we move through to complete removal of what's proposed without interfering with the contract timelines?
Mr. Mathers.
Through the chair, absolutely, we're always open to any kind of new information and feedback from folks. We do our best, and we feel that we hopefully we have done our best, but if there's some new information and we can have some new eyes on this, then that could be helpful. I would just like to note, just so that the committee and everyone else is aware, is that there was a comment around the migratory birds and a sweep being done. I just want to assure everyone that a sweep was done before the trees were removed on Highway Ave, and that all this work would be outside the federal bird window, so we would be covered off from any kind of environmental issues. But just want to make sure that everyone is confident with that we're doing the right thing as far as when we cut down the trees. However, again, like, we can work with the resident and take another look at these trees, and just helps make sure that everyone's on the same page as far as an understanding of why we have to remove or possibly not have to remove a tree. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions from our committee? Councillor Cassidy.
I just thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me speak again. I just want to add that I went through 2 of these in Ward 5 where a number of trees were removed, but I also want to say that staff did an exemplary job working with the community. On one street, the tree removals were delayed, I think, by about 2 years. while staff continue to work with and talk to the community to try to save as many trees as possible. And then in the Grenfell neighborhood as well, and what was the initial identification of the trees that would be removed. In working with the community and consulting with the community and doing their utmost to preserve as many trees as possible, they whittled that number down. So I have confidence in staff that they really do care. They're not just out to just take down trees willy-nilly. We recognize trees as a vital part of our infrastructure. They're city-owned assets, and they're important, and they can't be replaced by a new, smaller tree. The new, smaller trees are welcome, and they do the replantings as much as possible, but nothing's going to replace a 50 or 60-year-old tree, unless you, because you can't replant a 50 or 60-year-old tree. But I do have confidence in staff. I've heard Mr. Mathers. They don't have immediate plans to start removing trees in this area, and they have plenty of time to consult with the homeowner and other people in the community that are interested in this, as well as the homeowners arborist. So I'm thankful that that the delegate came forward and brought this issue to us, and I'm thankful to staff for being open.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? Then I will thank you, Ms. Sanderson, for coming today. I think you've heard from the committee that we totally understand where you're coming from. Unfortunately, infrastructure projects have to be done for the good of the city. But from this committee's standpoint, we want to make sure, if at all possible, those beautiful mature trees that you spoke about, if the project can be done and save those trees, every possible thing, an option should be explored. And I hope with this added motion that you will feel confident that we are giving it due diligence. So at this time, I'd like to call the vote. Councillor Pelosa?
Yes.
Councillor Lewis?
Yes.
Councillor Cassidy?
Yes.
Councillor Van Meerbergen?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion is carried 5-0.
Thank you. We now move on to deferred matters list. Can I have a motion to receive that? Councillor Lewis, second. Councillor Pelosa, any questions or comments? Seeing none, then I will put that to the vote. Councillor Pelosa?
Yes.
Councillor Lewis?
Yes.
Councillor Cassidy?
Yes.
Councillor Van Meerbergen?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion is carried 5-0.
I have a motion to adjourn. Councillor Lewis? All in favor? Hand vote. Motion's passed. Thank you very much, folks.